Thank you very much. So we have good news. We've reached a deal. It's a good deal for everybody, I believe. And I think you were saying this is probably the biggest deal ever reached in any capacity, trade or beyond trade.
It is.
It's a giant deal with lots of countries, because, as you know, Ursula represents a lot of countries, not one country. It's not easy for you. It's because a lot of very different countries, great countries, but some are strong with cars, some are strong with agriculture, some are strong with both, right? You have a lot of different factors. So we're going to do the following. The European Union is going to agree to purchase from the United States $750 billion worth of energy, $750 billion worth of energy. They are going to agree to invest into the United States $600 billion more than they're investing already. So they're investing a large amount of money. You know what that amount of money is. It's very substantial, but they're going to invest an additional $600 billion. They're agreeing to open up their countries to trade at zero tariff. So that's a very big factor. Opening up their countries, all of the countries will be opened up to trade with the United States at zero tariff. And they're agreeing to purchase a vast amount of military equipment. We don't know what that number is, but it's the good news is we make the best military equipment in the world, so sort of you have to do that. I mean, until somebody tops us, which is not going to happen. We're way ahead of every other country in terms of the quality of the military equipment. You saw that recently in Iran, and you see that, unfortunately, you see that often for all the wrong reasons, right? So those things are $750 billion, $600 billion, opening up the country. We are agreeing that the tariff straight across for automobiles and everything else will be a straight across tariff of 15%. So we have a tariff of 15%. We have the opening up of all of the European countries, which I think I could say were essentially closed. I mean, you weren't exactly taking our autos, you weren't exactly taking our agriculture, and then you would have smaller things, but for the most part it was closed. And now it's open. It's open for our companies to go in and do a good job with it. I think you'll like them. I think you'll like it.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's live streaming. I appreciate you all, whether you're watching this stream on YouTube, on Rumble, or on Ganjing Word. And before I start today's live streaming, or the explanation and the commentaries about today's two topics, which I'm going to address, I have to make a statement and an announcement that after 2 weeks of email exchanges between me and YouTube team, they have decided that the strike which they gave me 2 weeks ago, they're going to keep it. They're not going to lift the strike because the woman who contacted me, apparently she's completely clueless, and I'm going to say it publicly. I hope she watches this. She's completely clueless. She doesn't even know who I am. She doesn't even know anything about anything, and she doesn't even know what this channel is about and why I started this channel in 2017 in order to expose the terrorism committed in my country, Syria, and specifically by Al-Qaeda and its affiliates. And she is accusing me of glorifying or sponsoring or supporting a proscribed organization, and in this case it is Al-Qaeda. And the context of this post is when I posted a photo of David Lammy shaking hands with a notorious terrorist Abu Muhammad al-Jolani, and I made a sarcastic comment saying that Palestine Action is not is a terrorist organization. Meanwhile, Al Qaeda is not a terrorist organization, and she considers that supporting terrorism. Make it make sense. And she even threatened me to demonetize my channel. If I show you the emails, it is absurd beyond belief. She threatened me with cutting off the source of my income if I ever support a proscribed organization ever again. And despite my attempts to explain to this lady that this is not the case, this is my channel, you can look up or look at the content. I'm not glorifying any terrorist organization or proscribed organization. In the contrary, I'm doing exactly the opposite of what you are claiming. But as we say, my words enter her ears from this side and go out from that other. She doesn't even want to read what I'm saying. So I would really appreciate it, guys, while you're watching this stream, if you can please hit the like button or just leave a comment, because this helps me navigate through this suppression which they impose on my channel. Because one more strike, I will lose my monetization and I could also lose my channel. And that's why I have contacted today a law firm in Germany, specializes in such matters, and I sent them all the details of this case and the email exchanges between me and YouTube. And I'm hoping that they would respond to me soon, and I will file a complaint against this woman and against YouTube, because there are legal channels which I can use to reverse this decision, right? And I don't want to continue the next 90 days sitting here and thinking that any day somebody from YouTube could come who's completely clueless and just clicks on the bottom and deletes my YouTube channel after I worked on this channel for 8 years. So this is at the beginning. And I already have backup channel, guys. I have a channel on Rumble. You can always follow me on Rumble. I've been trying to tell you all the time that you guys also can follow this YouTube channel on Rumble, right? So I'm present on YouTube, Rumble, and on Ganjin Word, and I'm streaming at the same time on these 3 platforms. So today's first topic is going to be the trade deal between the United States and EU, and the second part is going to be about the starvation in the Gaza Strip, and specifically the condemnations of Egypt. So, or against Egypt. There is a plan which I'm going to reveal and expose to you, how the Muslim Brotherhood powers in the region are trying to start a civil war in Egypt to help Israel. Just like they did in Syria, they're trying to do the same thing with Egypt. And by the way, just also very special thanks to our friend Red Access for moderating this live chat. Thank you so much, Red Access. He is doing a great job. Stay, please, respectful to him. Even if you disagree with his political opinion, stay respectful with everyone. Most of the viewers of this channel are over 45 years old, and they're coming to the channel to engage in a respectful and civilized political discussion in the live chat as well. So our friend, Thomas Fuzzy, he published a brilliant article today about this trade deal between the United States and the EU, and he says, EU trade deal is a capitulation to America. So is that really the case? Let's see the argument, if it makes sense to you. The European Union and the United States finalized a trade agreement imposing a 15% tariff on most EU exports to the United States. While the agreement averted an even harsher 30% tariff threatened by Washington, many in Europe are calling it a resounding defeat, or even an unconditional surrender for Brussels. It is easy to see why. The 15% tariff on EU goods entering the US is significantly higher than the 10% that Brussels had hoped to negotiate. Meanwhile, as Trump himself boasted, the EU has, quote, opened up its countries at zero tariff to American exports. Crucially, EU steel and aluminium will continue to face a crushing 50% of tariff when sold into the US market. This asymmetry places European producers at a severe disadvantage, raising costs for strategic industries such as automotive or the car industry, pharmaceuticals, and advanced manufacturing sectors that underpin the EU's $1.97 trillion transatlantic trade relationship. Fazli says even worse, the EU has committed to $600 billion in new US investments, as well as $750 billion in long-term energy purchases and increased procurement of American military hardware. This further deepens the continent's structural dependency on US energy supplies and military resources, because we always hear the argument that the EU has to decrease its dependency on the Russian gas, but the EU is moving slowly but surely into a high dependency, or as our friend Fazi calls, structural dependency on US energy supplies and also military resources, because now the EU is committed to buy a lot of American weapons. So what are the lessons we have learned from this deal? First, the deal should finally shatter the long-standing myth that the EU strengthens its member states by increasing their negotiating power. For decades, Europeans have been told that only by pooling sovereignty into a supranational bloc could they wield enough collective clout to stand up to global powers. I'm sorry, I'm looking into my dog. I think he was trying to get on the couch, which I had to look at him in a stare at him in a way that he doesn't do that. Yes, don't jump on on the couch. So this is the first lesson which we can continue here in the green part. This was always a convenient fiction. In reality, the opposite is true. The EU systematically erodes the ability of individual nations to respond flexibly to domestic and external challenges based on their own economic and political priorities. The bloc's rigid framework, its multi-layered and bureaucratic decision-making structure, chronic lack of democratic accountability, and suffocating regulatory overreach only compounds these weaknesses. By locking European nations into a supranational straitjacket, Brussels has deprived them of the sovereign tools, industrial policy, trade flexibility, and energy independence, which are needed to defend their own interests. What is more, the EU has always been ideologically and strategically wedded to Atlanticism, and its progressive integration with NATO in recent years has only deepened its subordination to the US. This alignment has become embarrassingly apparent under von der Leyen, which our friend, by the way, Kevork Almassian, says that she doesn't represent the EU's interest, but rather he considers her an employee representing US interests. As a result, far from making Europe stronger together, the EU has delivered an unprecedented loss of leverage and autonomy. The bloc now resembles the very thing it was supposed to overcome, a collection of vassal states unable to chart an independent course and increasingly reduced to the role of Washington's economic protectorate. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not saying that I'm an expert. I'm not an expert on this issue at all. But handing over this type of powers, authority, especially when it comes to trade matters with nations outside the EU, it should be a sovereign matter. This is just my opinion. But if you hand over such a very important factor, very important thing which directly impacts the livelihood of your citizens and the health of your national economies, if you hand them over to bureaucrats like von der Leyen and her team, I think those unelected officials could be easily compromised and outside investors, multinational corporations could come and easily, I'm not saying buy them and make them a puppet, but they could connect their own or link their own interests with the invested interests or financial interests of these politicians. And accordingly, such deals could be struck, right? Now, it seems that the European countries or the European Union is going to pass through very difficult times economically and also on the financial level. Now, economically, there are going to be huge deficit in this trade relationship between the US and the EU. And also the politicians in this country, especially in countries like France, Germany, the UK is not in the European Union, but still they have the Nordic countries, for example, they have all collectively, it seems, decided that they also want to increase the expenditure on the military, on the defense budget, which will definitely be on the expense of other vital services presented to the people, such as education, healthcare, the infrastructure, which if you guys live in Europe, I don't know how's the situation in your cities or in your country, in your countries, but you can see with your objective eye the deterioration of the infrastructure in different places also where I live, especially when it comes to the cleaning, sanitary, homelessness, security. Very important issue. Like we have to spend billions and billions more on the military or the defense budget. Meanwhile, on our daily lives, we're facing a lot of security challenges, right? By drunk people, people on drugs, Islamists, radical people with knives all the time. The other day, I was in the bus, and for the first time, I heard that they started playing this recording in the bus, telling the people that it is not allowed to carry a knife or any other guns in the bus. And to be honest with you, do you really need a statement, an announcement to tell the people that they cannot carry guns? Is this directed to the German people? Who is this directed for? Like, I was so shocked to hear that we have to declare now in the buses, public transportation basically, that guns are not allowed. This is basically a basic logic, right? Nobody should carry a gun, knife, or attack someone in the bus. But this is where we are at the current moment, because I hear every day, if you turn on your radio, if you watch the news, knife attacks, people killing each other. It's like, what's happening, right? So the security, this on the social level, on the bottom of the society, where the people take buses, people take these underground trains or the overground street trains or walk in the street, they're also facing insecurities. Who is dealing with these issues, right? I don't see much improvement in the country where I'm seeing that this is deteriorating. Meanwhile, we want to spend tens of billions more over some imaginary outside and external threat, right? This would be my opinion about this case, but who am I to judge? I'm not European and I don't want to intervene further in this case. But our friend Arnaud Bernard, who is French himself, he has made a brilliant commentary about this. He says, if Europeans were paying attention or being told the truth, they should be beyond appalled by this deal. It is nothing more than one of the most expensive imperial tributes in history, just a massive one-way transfer of wealth with no reciprocal benefits. So what is the deal about? The EU now gets charged 15% tariffs on its exports to the US when they commit to charging zero tariffs on US imports in the EU. 2, the EU agrees to invest $600 billion in the US for no other obvious reason than pleasing the daddy. 3, the EU will purchase hundreds of billions of dollars American military equipment. 4, the EU commits to buying $750 billion worth of very expensive US liquefied natural gas, specifically $200 billion for each of the next 3 years. In exchange for all these concessions and extraction of their wealth, they get nothing. I'm not even exaggerating. That is the deal. The EU gets nothing. This doesn't even remotely resemble the type of agreement made by the two equal sovereign powers. It rather looks like the type of unequal treaties that colonial powers used to impose in the 19th century, except this time Europe is on the receiving end. More worryingly, this sets a dynamic and a precedent. What do you think happens next from here? In the 19th century, were colonial powers content with their first unequal treaty? Of course not. One of the key rules of geopolitics is that weakness only encourages further exploitation. Again, this is Europe's century of humiliation. Now, this could be a century of humiliation. However, I also suspect and think that this will also encourage many of the anti-EU forces in the continent, especially those who say they want to exit the EU in Germany, in France, and elsewhere, to gain more momentum. But don't be so excited about them. I also think that they are in one way or another compromised or being now compromised by different political forces in order to bring them into more the mainstream side of the populism, right? This is what I anticipate in the near future in Europe. I don't know, guys, where do you live and how do you see these things, but definitely this is going to have some backlash, especially social backlash, and this will change the voting outcomes in the near future in Europe by the people, and the people will choose more populistic groups, and these populistic groups will use this opportunity to tell to the people to vote for them, but at the end of the day, they will not change much. They will not change much. And even if they leave the EU, the US will come and strike singular deals with each and every one of them, because the logic says any two powers negotiating, they have to be peers, right? And you don't have to be like equals, but you need to have certain leverage to impact the outcome of the negotiations in your favor, or for the outcome to be more or less win-win, right? But this is my opinion after the destruction of the Nord Stream pipelines and the decision of the collective West, especially in Europe, that they will no longer buy gas from Russia, and this is the end. Enough. They're not going to rely at all on Russian gas. I'm not saying from who they should buy, but I'm just saying that if after the destruction of the Nord Stream pipeline and the decision of these European countries to completely abandon the Russian gas, then it seems that this will lead into more dependency on the American gas and also from other sources such as Azerbaijan, which is, do you really think Azerbaijan in the freedom index is better than Russia? Do you think that in the democracy index or the freedom of speech or journalism or is Azerbaijan better than Russia? But they buy gas from Azerbaijan and they have no problem dealing with Azerbaijan. They don't close the embassies of Russia. They don't cut relations with with Azerbaijan. They don't impose sanctions on Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan also attacks and invades neighboring countries. They also jail journalists. So the criteria here is not this freedom and democracy. That's why I always tend to believe that some of these politicians in Europe specifically, they don't represent the national interests of their own people. And this is something hard to say sometimes, and it hurts. Of course, if you're European and you hear that, it hurts. But I don't find a logical explanation why would Europe or the European Union accept such a deal. But we had lots of backlash about this. This is François Bayrou. He is the Prime Minister of France. I don't know how honest and how honest he is with his statement. He says, von der Leyen-Trump agreement, it is a dark day when an alliance of free peoples united to affirm their values and defend their interests resolves to submission. So basically saying that Europe has submitted completely to the United States. We have Thomas Freulich. Thomas is a German member of the European Parliament from the AfD, so the populist right-wing party in the European Parliament. He says the tariffs of 15% on exports to the United States no tariffs on imports to the European Union. The EU agrees to invest $600 billion in the USA, hundreds of billions of dollars in American military equipment, and $750 billion in expensive US liquefied natural gas. What is the compensation? Nothing. A typical relationship between a hegemon and its vassal. I mean, you don't have to be a right wing to agree with him, but I agree with him, right? Another German activist who is again on the right side of the political aisle, he says, with all clarity, Europe is a vassal of the United States, not a partner, not a friend, but an imperial periphery, nothing more. If the 21st century is not to become one of total humiliation for our Western civilization, the first step must be to overcome transatlanticism and ingrained Americanism. And yes, this is possible even with a critical distance from Russia. I think many people think in a very binary manner, and they see that if Europe has to distance itself from Russia, then they have to come closer to the United States. But if you increase the structural dependency of your economies on the United States, just like many other commentators said, and I referred to them during this conversation, the United States will never stop. You gave them not inch, you gave them a big square meter, right? They will come and ask for more and more and more. And this will be, there is no end, right? Once this process starts, that the US sees that the European Union as a union will bow. And you guys know, following this YouTube channel for a long time, I analyze the geopolitical conflicts from a very critical point of view of the United States foreign policy. And the United States doesn't know friends, doesn't know allies. The United States only knows subordinates. And once you become a subordinate, they will suck you dry. This is the unfortunate truth. I remember the statement of the former Egyptian president, Hosni Mubarak, who said, those whose only blanket is America, they get cold. So I hope people in Europe, especially policymakers, are aware of this. If they're not aware of this, that's a really problem. If they are aware of it, it's an even worse problem, because this could signal another thing, like they're compromised, right? I don't know which one is the truth. Let me know. I don't know. Now, Ursula von der Leyen cannot be that stupid. She's not a complete fool and dumb. But when she makes a very foolish statement, such as the liquefied natural gas from the United States is, quote, more affordable and better than pipeline gas from the right next door, this means, as our friend Alex Christoforous says, Europe is being destroyed, and he says this is deliberate. I will show you this video of her when she talks about the liquefied natural gas.
We will also increase our energy cooperation. Purchases of US energy products will diversify our sources of supply and contribute to Europe's energy security. We will replace Russian gas and oil by significant purchases of US LNG oil and nuclear fuels. US AI chips will help power our AI gigafactories, and help the US to maintain their technology edge. I want to thank President Trump personally for his personal commitment and leadership to achieve this breakthrough. He's a tough negotiator, but he is also a deal maker. We still have too much Russian LNG that is coming through the back door again to our European Union, and some Russian gas and oil still in the European Union, which we do not want anymore. We want to absolutely get rid of Russian fossil fuels. And therefore, it is much welcome to purchase the more affordable and better LNG from the United States.
So I'm not saying from who Europe should buy, but this is a false information. The Russian gas they cost the European Union approximately between 10 to 20 euros per megawatt per hour. And the US liquefied natural gas delivered to the EU because they have. So what happens is Russia can send a pipeline and it's way cheaper. And the United States has to send it via the tankers, right? And passing through the ocean. So the Russian gas, every megawatt per hour costs between 10 to 20 euros, depending on the deals with different European countries. And the American liquefied natural gas delivered to the EU costs between 25 euros to 45 euros. That's almost 3 times more expensive than the Russian gas. And if Russia is the problem because Russia invaded Ukraine, right? This is the argument. Then what about Azerbaijan? Why are they buying then gas from Azerbaijan? And this is not me. This is the BBC. Europe accused of going soft on Azerbaijan to avoid buying Russian gas. Shortly after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, European Commission President von der Leyen declared Azerbaijan, quote, a key partner in EU efforts to move away from Russian natural gas. In that time, Aliyev has reestablished control of the breakaway Karabakh region, causing an exodus of its entire American population. Look, they don't even call it an ethnic cleansing, but because, of course, it's BBC. He has also secured a 5th consecutive term in an election widely criticized by monitors and cracked down on opposition and press freedom. Of course, he also appointed his wife as the vice president. So this is the pipeline route, by the way. This is called the Southern Gas Corridor, guys, coming from Baku, passing through the Azeri territories, goes to Georgia, and from Georgia to eastern Turkey, and passes all the way to Greece, and from Greece to Italy. And from Italy, they distribute it to other European Union countries. The EU wants to diversify where it gets its gas to avoid being dependent on a single supplier such as Russia. Azerbaijan is far from being the biggest player, as its overall share in EU natural gas imports remains a modest 4.3% despite an uptick in supplies. But the share is much higher in some member states connected to the Southern Gas Corridor pipeline from Azerbaijan. For example, Bulgaria's 40% of natural gas imports come from Azerbaijan, and Italy and Greece are about 15%. So the power will not go out in Europe without Azerbaijan gas, but that is not the point. Who says that? Benjamin Godwin, who is a risk analyst specializing in the Caucasus and Central Asia. So President Aliyev has other benefits to Europe besides gas. So what are the benefits he's giving? He has consistently supported Ukraine's territorial integrity in the face of Russia's invasion, a rare stance among ex-Soviet states, seen by the Kremlin as allies. Baku's relationship recently also have taken a dive in. They had lots of disagreements and backlashes. By openly challenging Russia, Aliyev has sought or seek to take on a larger role in the region traditionally dominated by Moscow. But he also presents himself to the West as an opponent to Putin. Another well-placed European diplomat said, we are absolutely not happy with Azerbaijan's human rights record, but there is not much we can do. So you see, there is not much we can do. They have lots of things to do with other countries. They imposed hundreds of sanctions against Russia. They imposed hundreds of sanctions against Syria. They have imposed sanctions against Iran. They have sanctioned against China. They have sanctioned all around the world countries who have a bad human rights record, right? But when it comes to Azerbaijan, they don't have much cards to play all of a sudden, right? This is the absolute hypocrisy of these European diplomats. That's why I don't believe for a second their intentions or their statements that they have goodwill and they care about the people in our region, and that their sanctions and their work and political activism in our world, spending money over these NGOs, media outlets, is for the sake of the people. It's not. It's for them to gain influence and not to improve the human rights situation in any way or shape. One of the reasons why they like Azerbaijan a lot is this so-called Zangezur corridor, right? And this Zangezur corridor is also, it's a shared project now that even Pashinyan is part of. And this is a secret memorandum which was published by Spain's Periodista Digital. And this secret memorandum, they reveal that Azerbaijan, Armenia, and the US, they want to create or are going to create what is called the Trump Ridge Transportation Corridor that will connect Azerbaijan's enclave and mainland across Armenia's Zangezur. You see this line, it starts green from here and it goes blue all the way, passing through Armenian territories. This is the Zangezur corridor. And then they pass through this Nakhichevan region and go all the way to Turkey. This is, Trump wants to call it Trump Ridge Transportation Corridor. The 42-kilometer corridor, which runs right across the Iranian border, will be built and controlled by Americans for the next 99 years and guarded by a US private army. Turkey gets unimpeded access to Central Asia oil and gas. Washington gets to have its troops on Iran's doorstep and the highest share of the transportation profits. And Armenia gets to be a sacrificial pawn in the new great game. Yeah, Armenia gets nothing from this. They think this is about money and they will get some billions and things will be all right. This is a huge geopolitical maneuver the US, Israel, Turkey, Azerbaijan are doing in the Southern Caucasus in order to strangle Iran and Russia. And once they do that, they will use the NATO Turkey and project the NATO transatlantic hegemonic power through this corridor into Central Asia in order first to siege or besiege, strangle Iran in the Southern Caucasus, and then project this power in Central Asia on the Southern Caucasus belly of Russia. Look, I've been warning against this for a long time, since 2018. And the other day I was a guest on Peter Lavelle's and George Samuel's show. For those who have watched this interview, I said, the problem with Russia is they don't have any soft power tools. They're like a dinosaur. And they always wait and act and react. That's the problem with Russia and Iran. They react, they don't act. And they waited for Armenia, which was a strategic ally for them for a long time, to be fallen in the hands of Pashinyan, who is an executive director of the globalists. Basically, he came to power after the color revolution, just like it happened in Ukraine, in the Maidan. And they have treated him like he's just a normal president, and that maybe he changes his opinion. And they have given him chances after chances after chances until Pashinyan started, destroying Armenia's relationship with Russia and becoming and reorienting the Armenian geopolitical posture towards the West. And what did Russia do in this regard? Nothing, just criticism, right? And the same thing goes to Iran. Iran is also, they are a good chess player, supposedly, but they're always on the defense mode. They're always on the reaction mode until Israel and the United States came after every ally of Iran in the region, and they have cut the arms of what they used to call the octopus, right? And then now we hear like tough words and tough statements from these politicians. Like Iran supported the capturing of Karabakh by Azerbaijan. They said this belongs to Azerbaijan under international law. If international law is the criteria, I have bad news for you, Iran. You don't recognize Israel as a legitimate political entity. Although 51% of historic Palestine is considered part of Israel under the UN Charter and recognized by the UN. But there are so many powers in the region who refuse to recognize that. So why is it when it came to Azerbaijan, you want to apply international law, but when it comes to Israel, you don't want to apply international law, right? So I think in this case, Iran has shot its own feet by allowing Azerbaijan to expand into Karabakh and build all these air bases and allow the Mossad to come 1 and 2 and 3 steps closer on the doorstep of Iran. I truly don't know if they were so naive or this was just a miscalculation. I really don't know. Now, since we're speaking about Iran, by the way, guys, yesterday, finally, 8 trucks started moving from Egypt toward Gaza. and they were expected to enter this morning, and they entered this morning into the Gaza Strip after receiving approval from Israel. After receiving approval from Israel. This is very important, which means all these agencies like the World Food Program and lots of media outlets, 115 media outlets, 115 aid groups who said in the past that it was Israeli authorities who were holding up the aid, they were correct. But in this case, we've heard a lot of criticism directed against Egypt. And I'm not defending the government in Egypt. And I will come to that just a moment. But I will show you the video of the aid coming into the Gaza Strip. Of course, this is good news, but it's not enough. So this convoy started getting into Gaza today, and in parallel, we've seen dystopian videos coming from Gaza, people trying to collect food. Some of these so-called aid, they are dropping it from the skies. And I'm going to tell you something very important here, guys. These trucks coming into Gaza are not enough. In no way or shape. And this is going to be this experience of starving the Palestinian people and pushing them to malnutrition. It's going to be repeated. Because last time, now, when the Israeli side did it, there were no sanctions against Israel. There were no condemnations in the UN Security Council. There were no resolutions, and they couldn't force Israel, right? Israel only did it for PR reasons now, to lift some of this media pressure against them. That's all what happened. They will continue doing it, and the outcome of this going to be the forced expulsion of the Palestinians from Gaza. I don't like to sell you illusions here. The situation which is now in the Gaza Strip, it is unbearable. And they have created this humanitarian crisis, this starvation, this malnutrition, this desperation among the Palestinian people, so that the people come and say, "Khalas, enough. I don't want to live under such circumstances. I prefer to go to the end of the world. I prefer to live on a boat in the Mediterranean. I prefer to sink in the ocean with my dignity rather than continuing and living under such circumstances." This is the psychological warfare that they have waged against the Palestinian people. And all it took, I've said this long time ago on this channel, I will say it again. I'm not afraid to say this. I truly believe that October 7 was a let it happen. I truly believe that the Israelis knew about Hamas plans. I truly believe that the Israeli intelligence and secret service and the military, they have allowed this attack to happen and allowed these Hamas militants to advance into certain kibbutzes and probably kill some soldiers and kidnap some soldiers as well, prisoners of war. They allowed this, and they enacted the Hannibal Directive. The Israeli army says we enacted and activated the Hannibal Directive to kill as many Israeli citizens possible, whether military or civilians, under the excuse, because under this Hannibal Directive, the directive gives the order to the Israeli soldiers to shoot and kill and destroy any enemy subject, object, moving or not moving if they are having Israeli hostages with them or prisoners of war. So kill as many Israelis as possible, create an atrocity propaganda about the decapitated babies, about the burned babies, about all these rape stories in order to create a narrative and sell this ethnic cleansing. This is what I believe. An October 7 attack, I'm not discussing whether the Palestinians had the right to do it or not. I'm not discussing that at all. But the outcome of this October 7 was that Hezbollah intervened to support their Palestinian brothers. Their entire leadership has been decapitated. Regime change enacted in Syria. The entire so-called axis of resistance is gone. There is no longer axis. There are players opposing Israeli and American hegemony in the region. Their numbers have decreased, but there is no axis any longer. So the outcome of the operation itself, this is what I'm discussing, right? I'm not discussing the attack itself, but rather what happened after that. Israel used this opportunity perfectly to first destroy the decapitation of the Hezbollah leadership, the activation of the regime change process in Syria in order to cut the access completely from each other and starve the Palestinian people and send them into desperation so that they could now do the ethnic cleansing. I will show you this video just for you to see the situation in Gaza, guys. I think this video is enough for us to understand the gravity of the matter there.
جبنا لقمة أولادنا الحمد لله. ايش شعورك وانت اليوم؟ مبسوطة والله، لقيت لقمة أولاد، أنا مبسوطة. لقيت لقمة أولاد اليوم الحمد لله. لقيت لقمة أولاد وشربهم 4 سنين و3 سنين، بقول لي يما أنا مشتاقة الخبز، مشتاقة للطحين، يصيح لي الولد في حضني، هو اللي جابنا على المقاطع، هو اللي جابنا على الموت. حسبي الله ونعم الوكيل، حسبي الله ونعم الوكيل. من وين انت جبتيها هذا؟ والله من عند الدبابة، حياة ربي من تحت الدبابة.
دخلنا من هنا ضلينا قاعدين، لو صار طخ 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 بشكل جنوني، بشكل جنوني. بعد هيك دخلوا المقاطير. عاد احنا والله ما لا احنا شايفين المقاطير ولا احنا شايفين اي جنود ولا اي حاجه. لهم الناس رسمي، كل واحد معاه سكينه رسمي، كل واحد معاه سكينه، حرام. وهذا كله اصلا موت. هيها اكلت سكينه وانا مش عارف اصلا من وين اكلتها، ودم هذا الطحين كله مليان دم. اخذنا كيس وجينا نتشلح، قلنا للزلمه ايش قسمنا فيه. والحمد لله على كل حال. بعد 50 يوم جونا.
I think this footage was enough for us to get a glimpse of what is going on in Gaza. This is, guys, what they normalize in Gaza. If you think that they're not going to do the same thing, and when I say they, I mean the empire. If you think there are other people who are not going to face similar fate after they normalize what happened in the Gaza Strip, you're mistaken. The future is going to be too dystopian for us to process and understand now. This is the Hunger Games. They're showing us a movie of Hunger Games in front of our faces, but this is a real one. So, if you want my advice, try to be as much self-sufficient as possible, especially when it comes to food. Especially when it comes to food. And what they're doing in this case is, of course, many powers in the region must be blamed and should be blamed and should be criticized. But there is a huge media campaign by these Muslim Brotherhood, Ikhwanji, Qatari-funded media outlets against Egypt. And why only against Egypt? I have answered this question to our friends, Peter Lavelle and George Samueli, the other day. I don't know if you watched that interview, but this is a 3 minutes segment. I'm answering to this question. Why this focus on Egypt, although on the other side of the Rafah border crossing, it's Israel who occupies it, which means that Israel is the one blocking the entrance of the aid and not Egypt. Take a look. This talk about Muslim Brotherhood being a terrorist organization, yes, I believe so. But they have been instrumentalized in several places in the region, especially after the Arab Spring, until this is the end of the Arab Spring, right? What happened in Syria was the last domino, basically. And they brought them to power. And now they're trying to do similar thing in Egypt. All this talk now, Egypt is strangling Gaza, Egypt is closing the borders with Gaza, but I'm looking into the map, I'm seeing that Israel occupies Rafah border crossing from the other side. Like, even if Egypt now sends everything, if Israel limits it, then they will not be able to send aid. So they're adding pressure on Egypt because the Greater Israel Project also extends to the Nile. And the last army in the region, the last strong army in the region is Egyptian army. There is no other army. You please criticize Sisi or Egypt as much as you want. I will join you. But at the same time, I will tell you, the only military power in the region, Arab army, is Egypt. And the only army which can stop the Greater Israel Project, in the Nile at least, is the Egyptian army. So the Muslim Brotherhood will be this fuel on the fire in Egypt again if they want to destabilize Egypt and start a civil war between the Salafists, the ISIS element.
Is that happening now, the Muslim Brotherhood?
There is a big mobilization against Egypt. If you turn on your Al Jazeera now, they have now Al Jazeera Egypt, 24/7, that Egypt is starving the Palestinian people. That's the narrative, 24/7. And people are making this NGO-style activism. They go to Cairo or Alexandria. What they're doing is they put in the can some rice, and they throw it in the water in the Mediterranean. They say this is for the people in Gaza. Like, they're throwing some rice that this could go all the way to Gaza. But if you want to help the people in Gaza, the Muslim Brotherhood, you know the way. The way is there. If you don't want to fight, if you say Egypt doesn't allow you, Egyptian army, go to Syria. Hundreds of Egyptians came to fight against the Syrian people. Hundreds of Palestinians came to fight against the Syrian people. Why don't you go do jihad in Palestine? Is jihad only in Syria? The Palestinian people are starving death every day. And it doesn't move their conscience. They don't want to wage jihad against anyone except against their own Muslim brothers. So what does this tell about this jihadi, so-called jihadi ideology in the region, and who is moving them or on the chessboard, basically. Otherwise, it makes no sense. You have 40,000 militants in Syria. They all come and say, we don't have an energy for wars any longer. We have 14 years war. We want peace. And then they go and kill minorities. So you have energy to fight. Defenseless people. If you like, guys, to watch this conversation with Peter Lavelle and George Samueli, I posted this conversation in length on my channel, and also you can watch it on their own channel, The Gaggles. And I just want to say to our friend Red Access that I also believe that Hezbollah has been played after the October 7th to enter this war, unprepared and on the terms of Israel, not on their own term. And they've been infiltrated. They on a cyber level, especially the pagers attack, and they have been also manipulated by the French and the Americans, who delivered a deal for cessation of hostilities to back then Najib Mikati, who was the prime minister. And after that, this deal was delivered to Hassan Nasrallah. And if you remember, in the last speech of Nasrallah before he was killed and assassinated, he called for the people to go back to Dahiya, to the southern suburbs of Beirut, because they were like half a step away from reaching a cessation of hostilities. And the Israeli prime minister, Netanyahu, was supposed to declare the cessation of hostilities during his speech in the UN General Assembly when he was in New York. And instead, he gave the order of the assassination of Nasrallah from inside the building of the UN. I'm sorry, but Hezbollah has been tricked multiple times after and before October 7. They have paid a huge price, and the Iranians have been also been duped and fooled and manipulated and tricked so many times by the Israelis. So, guys, before we end this conversation, I would really appreciate it if you hit the like button. Please do it before leaving this conversation. At the beginning of this show, I said that YouTube decided to not lift the warning and the strike against this channel, and they're suppressing the reach of the channel and the streams to other people. They're not showing it on the suggestion list, for example. And the ridiculous excuse is that I support Al-Qaeda, proscribed organization. The entire channel, Syriana Analysis, is built to condemn Al-Qaeda and their affiliates, and they claim that I supported Al-Qaeda. Make it make sense. However, I sent a long email and explanation to a legal firm in Germany, and I requested the legal assistance regarding my YouTube channel, which they are specialized on. So let's see what is going to be their answer. I will pursue a legal path against YouTube because the woman who contacted me, you're clueless. You don't know anything about anything, neither about politics, neither about me. You just think that you know something you don't know. And she threatened me with demonetization of this channel and probably also taking down this channel completely. But I will take the legal path. I will go after YouTube and after her, and I will try to remove and lift this strike on this channel, so the reach of this channel would go into normal. But until then, if you want to support me, the only thing I'm asking you is just hit the like button, share this with your friends, and leave a comment. That's all. If you like also to support, guys, the independent work I'm doing, you can become a patron, patreon.com/Syriana Analysis. The link is scrolling on the screen. If you don't like to use Patreon, there are different means in the description below. And thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. And thank you so much, Red Access, for your amazing moderation. I love you all, guys. And I will see you tomorrow. Peace be upon you, upon your families. Salam.